There we go. Okay. Let's see. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Let's see, there's a little bit of delay. But I think the delay is less at the beginning. Okay, now they can hear me. Great. So what I would write down is polygons only have one side. This is counterintuitive to how you conceptualize it, certainly at the beginning. It looks like polygons are pieces of paper, right? They're thin, they have no thickness, but they have two sides. Because that's how Cinema 4D shows them to you. And so this, whether you see the other side or not, has to do with something in computer graphics called back face culling. So in instances where it's important to be as efficient as possible, you don't want to have to render a bunch of stuff that no one is ever going to see, right? So you don't want to have the computer to spend a bunch of resources trying to render something that's behind something else or the inside of something that's just going to get covered up by something else. And so this exists in Unity by default. And so this is what's happening for Celeste's box. And when we address this, we want to have, for things that have an inside, you know, like a box or a treasure chest or containers of some kind, they need to have an inside face and outside face. So even very thin things need to have a small amount of thickness. So with that in mind, allow me to demonstrate. So I've got this, and my assignment is to make a box that the character can put something in. I come in here, I'm like, delete this. Oops, I go to polygon mode. And I'm done. Great. I made a box. I'll call it box. I will export this object as an FBX. I'll do all the stuff that we have talked about. This will be called box. Make sure no cameras, no lights. There we go. There's no subdivision here. Okay. And let's bring it into Unity to demonstrate. And so in here, can I do this? All right, I can't import. Import, new asset, documents, box. There we go. And let's bring it in here. And I get this. Right? So it's not that the top is yellow, it's that the top is see-through. See how this is working? Right? So this is weird by default. It's like the back side is a wormhole or something, right? You don't see the other side. If I go around, you see that the outside of the box and the bottom of the box, if I were to rotate it, looks fine. But this is because the back side is being culled here, right? The culling, again, a word for removing from the render, getting rid of it so that it doesn't waste resources. So the better approach to modeling said box is that it needs to have some kind of thickness. There's several ways to do this. Let's look at a really simple one. One is, I wish it was a different name, but the cloth surface, okay? So there's a bunch of cloth stuff in 740. Who asked me? Someone asked about a tablecloth at one point. You did.
I asked about creating like a cloth draping over something.
Okay.
To make the ghost, what I ended up doing.
To make a what?
The ghost.
Oh.
But I ended up going a different route. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's down the road a little bit. So there's a bunch of cloth stuff because you can simulate cloth in Cinema 4D. But in this case, this cloth surface actually does thickness automatically. I'll show you. And so I'll grab that one. Shift C, cloth. There we go. Get this one, the green one, right? So in your notes, green one. You want the green one, not the purple cloth, not the other stuff. And so I put the box in there and select the cloth surface. Let's look at what we got here. There we go. The cloth surface does two things. It will add subdivisions, not like the subdivision surface. The subdivision surface smooths when it adds subdivisions. Here, it's just adding, it's just subdividing without adding smoothness. And I don't use that very often, so I'll just say no subdividing. But then there's also a thickness parameter, which allows me to dial that up. And when I do that, now it takes something that was one polygon thin and adds thickness to it. Right? So now it has an inside face and an outside face. Right? And not only will this make it render correctly in Unity, let's do that. I'll go ahead and say File, Export Selected Object as FBX, and we'll call this box inside. Hit Save, and say OK, and come back here. It also allows you to put a different material like inside the box, which was not exactly on the plate before, right? Where you'd want to say you had a treasure chest, right? Where you wanted the inside of the chest to look different than the outside of the chest. That would not be doable in this instance here. And so let's go ahead and import box inside, say import, there we go. And now I bring this in. And now we have exactly what we wanted all along. A box that has an inside face of some kind. Does this make sense?
Yeah, I do have a question. So I did the extrude thing for this box, and you know it was similar to how I did the hot air balloon box, and that one turned out okay, but you know I don't know what was wrong with this one.
Okay, so the other approach here, so the cloth surface is one way to add thickness. The other way to add thickness is to extrude. However, let's go ahead and grab all of the polygons here, Control A, and what's the shortcut for extrude? D. And I'll extrude this out. Looks okay. However, if you look, it hasn't made, it extruded it out, and at first glance it looks okay, but it actually hasn't made the inside face. Because if you use the extrude tool in this way, then you want to make sure that this is checked. The create caps. This inside edge is essentially the cap in this instance. And so when I check that box, now I get the inside, right? So the cloth surface object would be the non-destructive way of doing this, right? Because you could go back in and dial it in. You guys understanding these two ideas, destructive versus non-destructive? Now, don't get too wrapped up in this, trying to do everything. Is it better if you had some sort of completely non-destructive workflow so you could go back and adjust everything the whole way through? Yes. Is that always achievable? No, right? There's some people who like really get obsessive about that, and don't let the word destructive carry too much of a negative connotation. Right? Sometimes you just need to model the thing and commit to some polygons at some point. But here, this would be the destructive workflow, right? Because it's not like something we can go back and adjust once we move on. right? All the non-destructive deformers and generators are great, but sometimes you just need to model the stuff, and it's not, not a big deal, especially in this sort of simple instance. And so that might have been what happened. Maybe you extruded and you didn't have the create caps checked. Because it looks, at first glance, when you look at what's going on there, it looks like it's probably okay. But without this checked, it looks like you're doing what you think you're doing. But then the why this is additionally confusing is that Cinema 4D, because it's not real time, right? Cinema 4D, you hit the render button, you walk away, you go get a cup of coffee, or you go to sleep, and you wake up the next morning, and then you look at your render, right? So it's not real time. It's not the same kind of emphasis on efficiency. And so there is no back face culling by default in Cinema 4D. So Cinema 4D will show you the other side of the polygons here. You can change it, but let's not get into that. The other thing to be aware of is Cinema 4D is trying to tell you this, even though it shows you them, by the color of the highlight. Everybody see this? Right? And so the color of the highlight is telling you about the normal direction. This is a word you want to, right? So the normal is the direction the polygon is facing. It's usually 90 degrees, right, or perpendicular to the face of the polygon. What you want is if you were to select all polygons on your object with Control A, you want it all to be yellow, right? Or orange. What are we going to call that? It's more of an orange, yeah? All to be orange. Inside out is blue. And so as before part of your checklist before you send things off to Unity, Control A, all of your polygons, and you want to be seeing all orange, no blue. Because blue is the backside of a polygon. And the blue, when you bring it into Unity, will be invisible, because it doesn't render the back side of it. Any questions about that? So this comes into play with these kind of objects, these objects that have an interior. And then also, if you're using the subdivision surface and you're really pulling things around, you can definitely pull things inside out, where you took the outside of something and pulled it up through the surface of something else. And so this, again, would reveal this. If you Control A everything and look at it, and you're seeing any blue, then you got a problem. You have something that's inverted, right? So if I hit Control A here, I'm like, oh, that's not right. And so I need to go back and do that extrude again with the create caps on. Now if I do it, and I hit Control A, there we go, right? No blue. Okay, let's talk about the environment stuff for setting up your scene for Monday, because that's what we want to have for Monday, like the total conversion of our 2D scene to 3D. So let me talk about that, and then we'll get to some of the online student questions. And so I'm going to make a new scene here, create new scene, and we'll call this outside. I'm going to go through two different ways to set up your environment and your lighting. One for just basic outside look and one for basic inside look. And so let's create one more new scene. And call this inside. There we go. And for inside, actually, let's start with inside. And so in this instance, let's say I want to have something that has walls, and I'll use that box I just made. So here it is, and I want this actually to be like a room, though. So I want this to be much bigger. Should I come over here and adjust the scale? No. Okay, not Celeste. Someone else tell me what I should do. Again, this box, I don't want it to be a box. I want it to be a room now. Liliana, I'm a current and former drummer, so you really need, just yell at me. Just yell at me. And now I'm 43, right? So it's definitely been, it's not going in the right direction. I'll say that.
Then you go to the scale factor and the mesh.
That's right, scale factor, right? So let's make it 10 times bigger and say apply. There we go. And so now I've got something that I could use as an inside space. Let's look at it from the side in orthographic mode and come in here and zero this out. I'm going to go ahead and say reset. Let's look at this. Great. All right, this works for now. So let's talk about our inside. And let's talk about our lights. The ones we're going to focus on today are these first three, pretty much. The point light and the spotlight. What I would write down for, let's go to a different color. For point light is essentially a light bulb. It's light that's emitting out in all directions spherically from a single point. The spotlight works like a theater spotlight. You can point and scale. We'll look at the specifics of that. And then for outside, the directional light is like the sun. All of the light runs parallel in the scene, as opposed to the point and the spotlight, which are emanating out from a single point. This matters a lot when you start thinking about your shadows and how your shadows are affecting your visual composition. And so let's light this box right now with some inside light, point light, and we'll use both here as an example. Great. And so I'm going to come in here and get rid of my directional light. There we go. And everything gets very dark. And I will bring in a spotlight for now. There we go. When this happens, it's just Unity sending some more information to the GPU, and sometimes it takes a while. So if you have the spotlight selected, you get a bunch of values here. You can, this is sort of the inner part of it, and this is the outer part of it. It's kind of dark right now, especially because it's the only, I got rid of the directional light, so there's no light in the scene right now. And then we can also, yeah, pull, the center one pulls it out. And so this is one of the first things about using these lights is that they have this range. Okay, if I were to turn off all the lights and light a light bulb here in the front of the room, the light would dim as it went from here to the other wall, but it would not stop, right? The photons reflect off the air and whatever exactly is happening there, and it dims as it goes further away, right? In computer graphics, the light only goes so far, and you need to control that here because you don't get a bunch of light bouncing around for free, right? That's the thing that's most different about the real world, right? There's no ambient lighting where light's going to bounce off other things to fill in areas. And so, for instance, here, the spotlight is pointed at the floor, but it's not lighting the floor at all because the floor is not within the range. If I grab this and drag it down, it's still a little bit too dim. So let's talk about the intensity. And so here, again, this is one of those ones, you see me dialing it up and down, and I'm getting a little bit of change. This might be a good use of magnitude of 10. And so that gives me more. If I move the light up, there we go. It's no longer casting any light on the floor, right? Because that's not within the range of the light. So if you want to cast light into something, you need to adjust the range of it. And it's got kind of a gradient here, you can see. And as I adjust this, you can tighten it up, yeah, or widen it out, get more something going on there. Also, by default, the lights are kind of tinted with a tungsten, right? So how many of you, anybody taken production yet? Video production? Or no? Okay, so when you're using lights for movie making, they're on this blue-orange spectrum. Let's see, I think in the other version of Unity it's different. But anyways, you can tint them here. And they have this slight orange tint by default. And let's put this in writing right now. If you tint the light, be very, very subtle. Everyone finds this feature and they want to turn their scene into some wild rave, and it just looks lame. Because in reality, to tint, it's just that the sliders are off in this instance, right? In reality, the amount of work it would take to get something as red as this is practically inconceivable, right? First of all, if you were to filter the light this much, you would darken it to the point where you would have to crank up the brightness of the light source. You wouldn't be able to get it. But I can do it right now just by, I want a red light. Boom, done. But this looks awful. So you want to stay really close to this upper corner, right? And just a little bit. And most of the time, you either want to be in the orange zone or the blue zone. All right, we'll make this one sort of like a inside-ish, maybe like a cave kind of thing. Yeah, that'll be good. So we got that going on. Let's make this one a little bit tighter. Yeah, let's control that thing. There we go. And maybe bring this in a little bit. Cool. And let's put something in here. So right now I'll just make another cube. Zero this out. There we go. And let's make put this spotlight sort of directly over the cube. So I'm going to go into orthographic mode, hit the button, select the top, and move this directly over this. Right there. And bring this stuff in. There we go. Come out of orthographic mode. Nice. And what is our... All right, we've got that going on for now. Let's look at the other kind of light. Let's get a spotlight, or sorry, point light in here. So I'll get a 3D object, or light, point light. And much the same, a little bit simpler. You can, here you see the light is going in all directions, right, from this thing. And so here, let's say that this, let's move this up, kind of like so. Maybe there's this is coming from a thing. Yeah, let's do that. So just very simply, I'm going to go ahead and make my point light a child of the cube and zero it out. There we go. Move it down a little bit, right, so it's right below the cube. And so this now sort of move over here. Now it kind of looks like a light, right? So I'm sort of blocking off that one part there. Let's come back and bring this up a little bit. Maybe move it down slightly. Out a little bit. All right, and we'll call this, probably turn this into a prefab. So this here will be wall light. And I'll prefab this. There we go. And so now, if I want some more wall lights, I can just sort of drag them on there. Let's make the intensity of this one a bit more. Maybe give these a little bit of that. There we go. So this is really awesome, right? You can adjust all of this stuff, and you're seeing the shadows happen in real time. The default mode for the shadows is in the light are real time. These default settings seem to be working for us for the most part. And so here, let's say this is like a donut temple. Let's go to our spotlight. Why are we not getting quite as much shadowing on our spotlight? Let's see here. Okay, so just okay, so I wasn't getting quite as much spotting on my shot light. So here's one. These are the things that changed a little bit. So this is new for URP. So here, this under shadow, this is the one thing I had to adjust right here. So this near plane is sort of the distance at which it will actually make shadows. And you see that if that's too high, then we won't get any shadowing. We want the shadow to happen there from our donut. So we have that levitating donut right here. Let's put a rotational script on the donut. No, we don't want it to fall. Turn this off. How's our donut still falling here? Let's unpack this prefab completely. There we go. No, it's rotating. I just had the wrong rotation in there. So we want Y rotation. There we go. There we go. That's what we're looking for. Any questions about this? Right? So if you're doing an inside scene, point lights and spotlights, don't go crazy. All right? Let's put a limit at, let's say no more than 10 lights. All right? That should certainly run fine on the computer, I would think. Yeah, because if you have a ton of lights, then calculating the lights and the shadows starts to become a problem, or it can. And so no more than 10 lights on the inside scene. All right, for spot and point. Let's add a material to this. So what was the website that we used for a good streaming, a good material? Yeah. Hold on 1 second. All right, let's grab a material so we can do this a little bit differently. So over here, I'll say a new one. And let's try this. So the stone wall, and if we look at the textures here, let's grab our, which one is just the color, like the color of the bricks? Not Celeste. Which one of these textures is the color of the bricks? The diffuse. Awesome. Diffuse is, and we want the PNG. There we go. And we also want the normal. That's going to give us the bumpy part of it. And let's go with those two from now. And grab those. Everybody recognizes this as a normal map, right? All the normal maps are going to look like this. They want to there we go. They'll look blue. Let's bring both of those in. And what do we have to do when we bring these in? Not Celeste. Celeste, you've been banned in a good way. Everyone else has got to step up a little bit. So what do we have to do with the two materials? I have to import them. That's correct, right? What else do I need to do? This one is good. This one, I need to tell Unity that this is a what? What kind of map is this? Write it down, normal, right? So you must set to normal so that it knows that it's not supposed to be a blue wall, it's a normal map. It's a different way to interpret the data. And so when you select it, you gotta come over here and say not texture type default, texture type normal. There we go. And I've got two textures. I need to put them on a what before I can put them in the scene, Gretel? Like I can't just drag this in here. It doesn't let me do that. Right, I got two textures. They need to go on. What's that? There's one thing before that, right? So the textures onto a material, and then the material goes on the mesh. And so we need to make a new material. So create a new material. There we go. We'll call this brick wall. There we go. And then what goes here? The other one. Diffuse. Very good. Yep. Color goes there. And then normal goes in normal. It's pretty straight ahead. Put this in there. There we go. And now I can take this material, which is somewhere here, and drag it onto my wall here. There we go. Now we're in the temple of the donut. Now we're talking. Let's get a gold pedestal. Gold. There we go. And so make this a little like that-ish. Make this very metallic and very shiny. And put this in here. There we go. Yes. Worship the donut. Here we go. So we've got the donut on there. This looks good. The bricks look weird. Why do they look weird? Assume this is a giant donut. The size of this room. What's that? Yeah, the bricks are too big. All right. So in the material, our tiling and offset allow us to address this. And so I can come in here and let's say 10 by 10. There we go. Maybe not quite so much. Maybe 8 by 8. And the smoothness here allows me to sort of make it look, you can go to like wet bricks or dry bricks by dialing up and down the smoothness there. See how that works? And let's place our camera. This is another good one. In Cinema 4D, right, those of you guys have taken 1A4, when you move your camera around and then you say, make me a new camera, it takes that view, right? In Unity, the shortcut is Control, Shift, F. So you would select the camera and then press Control Shift F to make the camera move to the current view. So I'll select the camera, and I want the camera to look, I want the game view, right? Because over here, when you select the camera, it gives you this cool view down here, right? And showing you like, here's what your game view looks like. But now if I say Control Shift F, boom, it takes the camera and snaps it to where my scene view is. And so now when I go into gameplay mode, or just preview it, I'll have this view of Temple Donut. So that's a good one. Control Shift F to move the camera around. Move the camera. I mean, you could just grab the camera and start moving it, you know, with all of your move, rotate, scale tools, but that's super slow. It's much easier to just sort of like get the camera to where you want it and then grab it here and say Control Shift F, and it goes right there. Now, you may notice that the one thing it does not, it moves the game camera to where the scene is, but the focal length of the scene camera and the game camera can be different. And we're seeing a little bit of that here. Like we see, well, it's pretty close. But the game, if I go to the game view and select the camera here and go to the field of view, which is our focal length, you can see I can adjust this. And now it does not adjust the scene view. The scene view camera has its own focal length control for that, but it moves it to that view. So just be aware that you may have to make some adjustments to the focal length there. Make sense? Okay. All right, so we made some lights and we put something in there. This is looking better. This doesn't look very shiny. Part of the reason is because it's just a primitive and it doesn't have rounded corners. So let's change that. I'm going to make it a sphere instead. Let's go ahead and reset. I think it goes more with our donut theme anyway. There we go. And put the gold on there. That's better. And reflections. Don't worry, I'll show you guys this right now because I really want this to look better right now. But let's go ahead and the reflections that happen by default are reflections of the environment, right? And so if you look at this for a second, you're like, okay, that looks shinier, good. But then as you look at it, you're like, hold on a second here. It's reflecting the outside sky in this room, right? Which isn't right. And so this is most of the time in video games, like up until the last year, all the reflections are faked, right? They're not how reflections work in the real world, bouncing light off of other things, right? That concept is called ray tracing. You have to trace the photon from point to point to point. That's expensive to do 60 frames a second. So they would all be faked, right? Like I guess I'll brag again, right? When I'm playing Spider-Man at home on my PS5, I can turn on the ray traced reflections, and when I walk by a store, I see myself in the window there, right? That wasn't usually the case when in anything really up until the last year. Like we've just hit the point where real-time ray traced reflections are like available to most hardware. So how do you fake reflections? You fake reflections with something called a reflection probe. So if you come in here to light, you may have noticed it at the bottom of this list. There's something called a reflection probe. Reflection probe is interesting. So again, you're trying to be efficient. And so if we come in here to the lights, reflection probe, there we go. Essentially what this is like you can think of it as a spherical camera, right? Does anybody have a GoPro? Right, GoPro has a really wide angle of view. A lot of skate videos use a GoPro, right? Because you want to be able to capture a big, wide angle because you don't know where people are going to be or anything, right? So it's easier to capture a bunch. Or you can think of it as a spherical camera, or you can think of it as 6 cameras arranged in like a cube pointing out, right? So like a box of cameras. And so they're capturing everything all around. And then they use the images that they capture to supply the reflections for the objects within the probe space. And so if I take this probe here, and you see it's represented by this box, I move it over, let's see here, like so, and I change it to real time so that it captures images all the time. Now, this looks like a passable reflection, right? Because I'm seeing the donut in the sphere. And so in an instance, I wouldn't want to, again, it's expensive to do this because it's doing exactly what I said. It sets up other cameras and then renders the view from those cameras, takes that texture and wraps it around our geometry as a reflection, right? And so that's happening at 60 frames a second as well. In addition to rendering your camera, like the main game camera, like there's these other reflection pro cameras rendering and creating these reflections. So you can't use a ton of these, right? But here, in this instance, we've got this focal point, and it makes a big difference. I think it makes a huge difference, right? Here it is without, here it is with. Without, with. Way better, right? Yeah. And again, only the stuff that's within the box will get the reflections here. So that's why we didn't see it here. And when I move it in, now we see it. And so the key was I made a reflection probe, and then the other part is turning the reflection probe to real time so that it works like the light works. You know, if I were to move the donut, it should change. No, maybe it's not going to change it. Or maybe if I click back on the reflection probe and see if I move the reflection probe here. It might only go in game mode. Let's see. No, we should be seeing it rotate there. Why are we not seeing it rotate? Let's look. You got it real time. Oh, that's right. So real time every frame. There we go. Let's see if that works. Type real time every frame. I think we're good. Let's try it. There we go. So those are the two you want to select. So this is awesome, right? This was not like when I started teaching. This is kind of like a pipe dream. And it only makes sense to do this kind of thing for super reflective, shiny things, right? If I didn't put my donut over top of a golden orb, like if it were just going to be concrete or something like this, it would not be worth it to do this, right? But in this case, it really pays off because it looks really good. So reflection probe, kind of icing on the cake, right? Don't get too worried about that one, and make sure that you say real time every frame in order to get the feedback about it. Let's do one more thing here. So part of the lighting, another part of it is sort of our effects, right? So in After Effects, we do a bunch of animation, we do things, and then maybe we put effects on afterwards to add glow or to blur things or all that kind of thing. All that stuff is generally referred to as what's something you do after? Post-processing, right? So what do we want to do to the image after we process it? And we can add that here with here we go, a volume. So we need to make a volume, and then all of our effects go on the volume. We'll get to what a volume is in a minute, but we'll do it that way, right? So we want global volume, and that gives us a volume. And here we need to make a new profile. Now there's this button here. All we need to do is press it, and it makes a new profile, which is super convenient. And all of the effects here are referred to as overrides. I wish they would just say effect. This is part of the problem of using all these different programs. The concepts are not that different. It's just everyone feels the need to invent their own vocabulary for said concept, and it is what it is. All right, so you can think of them as effects. So for instance, the one, this is, if you hit add override, you can search. Let's put some bloom in there. Can't press enter, apparently. I didn't spell it right. There it is. All right. Okay, so bloom, let's come up with the list of the main ones. Bloom is kind of glow / light haze, somewhere in between there. Does a lot to the atmosphere. There's a basic color correction, so you can dial up any Instagram filter look on your scene. We have motion blur and depth of field, right? All different camera effects. Let's keep it simple here, but we can add a lot of interest to the scene using this. So this happens after I've done all this work setting up the scene, the lights, everything else, right? And so the camera renders this stuff. Then it gets handed off to another part of the program that runs the effects on the final 2D image. Does that make sense, right? So it's as if we rendered this out to a movie, put that movie into After Effects, and then went crazy in After Effects, right? We could put in the glow, we could put in, whatever. It's not as much stuff as After Effects, but it's a lot of stuff to really sort of dial in a look for it. Again, you make a global volume, you press the new button to create a new profile. The profile is just the thing that sort of saves the effect settings. And another important thing is that you're editing that file. And so changes during play mode will stick. Why? Because you're not editing a game object. You're editing this file that saves the effect settings. Right? The game objects are part of the game. And for reasons that we've discussed before, we don't want those to change permanently when we make changes in game mode. And again, I'll remove this one here. Let's say remove. And so this is what you get. And you can add effects by clicking the Add Override. This is searchable here. If you want to poke around, you can say post-processing. And then these are the effects here, right? And so we got bloom. Like I said, this is the glow, chromatic aberration. So he's taking photography. Anybody taking photography? Okay. All right, good. Well, you're about to get a bunch of photography questions. What's chromatic aberration? What's that? Anybody else?
I'm taking it right now, so we haven't gotten there.
We haven't gotten that yet. Okay, so when you use a real camera lens, they're not perfect. And a big part of computer graphics is reproducing the defects in real photography, right? So that it looks believable, right? Not necessarily real, but there's over 100 years of photography culture, and it's part of our visual language at this point. So in order for computer graphics to participate in that conversation, there's a lot of work that's gone into making it function like a real camera, because that's the language everyone knows. So chromatic aberration, when a lens is imperfect, it is bending the light as it comes into the camera, correct? But it doesn't bend all of the wavelengths of light equally, and so you get separation. So let's look at that here. I'll do them one at a time. Let's go ahead and add some bloom, right? Because that a little bit goes a long way. Again, go ahead and adopt my tinting ethos here. A little bit goes a long way. Don't go crazy. When you want to change one of the settings, you check the box, right? Otherwise, leave it as is. If you don't know what it does, you can play with it, but probably leave it to where it was. And so in bloom, we have the intensity of the glow, the intensity and the threshold, right? So this is how bright does something need to be to glow? And this is how much does it glow? And so right now the intensity is 0, so it's not doing anything to my scene. If I dial this up, you see that that bright spot on the gold sphere is glowing, right? If I turn the threshold down, if I grab this and drag it, everything gets a little blurry here, right? Because now everything is being glowed. Everything is above that threshold. And so the effect is being applied to the entire image. And so usually you don't want to have it that low. You want it to just be applying to bright things. So that gives them this sort of, this glow to it. Looks way better, right? Here it is, there, right? Does a lot to bring the scene together. It's not doing light bouncing, but it gives us that impression where it's sort of functioning more like a real scene would, where now things are bleeding into each other a little bit. So that's bloom. Let's add the chromatic aberration. And I'll turn that on, and let's see where we can see it. Yeah, watch the edge of the gold orb. See what happens there? Right, so this is way too much. This is bananas. But like, you can see, not only it's distorting the image just very slightly, and towards the edges here, you see that the channels are separating out. Right, so it's like this duplication thing. What's that? Yeah. The old style ones. I can't remember the name for that. Anaglyph? I don't think that's right. Yeah, the red and blue channel ones. But yeah, here it's separating out. So this is chromatic aberration. Again, a little bit will give you just enough that you wouldn't even know, but it's sort of making it more of like a photographic image, right? What else we got? Let's look here. Let's go to yeah, so color adjustments here allow you to do your hue, shift, desaturation, right? So we can give it more of a sort of Instagram-y look. We could dial down the contrast, right? And here's the post exposure, something like that, right? So before, after. Before, after. I'm not saying do exactly what I did here. I'm saying these are the main tools, bloom, chromatic aberration, color adjustments, to give it some sort of flavor. So it's not just like whatever Unity spit out, right? You can sort of give it more of a certain direction, a certain feel. Yes?
Can you send me the file of the code that was like more rounded out the other class?
The one that you sent me?
Yeah. Does it automatically update mine? No.
What? No.
No.
Like you send it to me, I change it, and yours updates?
Yeah, I thought that's something.
No, that doesn't happen. I'll send it back to you. Yeah. Makes sense here for everything. Okay, so this is basic inside. Let's do a little bit outside. And so come back to our scenes and say outside. And I'm gonna create more of a, let's bring in a landscape, something that's gonna be a little bit more interesting. Cool. And let's bring that in. There we go. Let's zero this out. And obviously make it way bigger. So I'll select it. And let's say, I don't know, 30 times larger. There we go. There's something for now. Let's grab a material for this. And I'll grab the diffuse again. And I'll grab the normal. And again, I need to make a new material, right? Create material. I need to organize my folders a little bit. I'll call this dirt, rocks, and bring in our textures. There we go. That's certainly better just out of the box. Probably a little too big. So let's come into the material, tile this a little bit more. Let's say maybe 5, 5. There we go. That makes our scale read like it makes a little bit more sense. Now, remember I said that this one is like sunlight, the directional light. The other thing to remember is that it is like sunlight. It's coming from all directions. And so directional light, rotate. Moving doesn't matter. Okay, you don't move it around, you rotate it. Think of it like the sun in the sky. You rotate the sun across the sky to change lighting conditions outside. And you're doing the same thing here. And so if I grab the directional light and come in here and grab rotation, you see how this affects my view. Let's come in here and I want to create some shadow. Get the mountain to create some shadow. There we go. The other thing is, let's go ahead and change this from soft shadows to hard shadows. There we go. Oh, cool. There's this. This is new in the newest version here. We get the actual sun. You can see it in the sky to some extent. And I want to see my scene from here. There we go. The shadows when I'm in a little bit closer with the camera, I get my shadowing happening here. This is nice. Cool. And so here, I want the camera to be here. I'm going to grab the camera and press what? Control Shift F. There we go. And so now my game view, my scene view are similar. Boat's a little too big compared to our mountain. Let's say 3.
That was hard. I think it's elements.
Yeah, this is like, you guys ever watch, what's the show? Drain the Oceans on, what was that, Nat Geo or Discovery or whatever?
I have that.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's all, right, they use LiDAR data, or not LiDAR, it's like some sort of sonar thing to map the bottom of the ocean, and then they do these computer graphic simulations about everything. A lot of them shipwrecks, that kind of stuff. And let's go ahead and make our volume. Now let's do some other changes on our light first. So here's our, there we go. That gives us a little bit more of a, I like that. And in general, nighttime is going to be bluer than our daytime lights. All right, so if I were to dial this down, we need to get a volume here to adjust our light. So let's go ahead and do that, or adjust our background rather. So make it the volume. Again, say new. And right, so just reading is outside. A big part of it is bringing in the directional light, and that's going to be our primary light for things happening outside. And why does this glow so much? It's the material. So, for instance, it's the bloom that allows you to make objects glow, right? So if I were to bring in another sphere, get back into orthographic mode. I'm going to make this sphere glow. So the glow is two things. It is the turning the bloom on in the environment, right? That's step one. Let's write this down. How to glow. One is that you need bloom in the global volume. Two, the material needs to be HDR. So this is high dynamic range. And so before, when we've gone in here and we've used our color picker to pick colors, we pick a color, right? There's a little bit more to it. You can pick the brightness of that color within the system. And this is the HDR color. So I'll make a new material. Here we are. And I'll call this glow green. I'll double click on it. And here, this is what's going to do it. We need to add emission, right? And so this is going to be the light it's producing. Now, it's going to glow itself. It's not going to shoot light onto other objects, right? You need to use a light object to do that. It's just going to look glowy. And so here, you see that by default, our objects are just, there's no light coming from them. So I turn on emission. I come in here, and I pick a greenish color. There we go. Still nothing down here. This is the HDR intensity. And so if I dial this up, does it do it in real time? Let's see here. If I dial this up on my, there we go. There we go. So it's on the sphere. As I dial this up, you can get kind of out of hand. But if you look carefully at the image, it's not casting green light onto the other objects, right? It's not a light. It's just the way it's interacting with the bloom that makes it look this way. Right, and so I'm in, right now we've used base map, metallic, smoothness, normal, and then emission. And so now we got something where, what is this is off here in the distance? You could create something a little more interesting. Making sense? Cool. All right. You guys start working here for a second. I'll load up the questions real quick. And while you guys are working, I'll answer some of the online questions. Okay? Everyone's got enough to do, right? All right. Let's do that.
So my question for this week is is there a way to edit the density of a fog material? Because one of the objects I was trying to make for my scene was like a planet where it was a sphere with a ring of fog around it, and I wanted to make it so that the fog became denser at the closer it got to the sphere, but I'm not really sure how to do that.
Okay. Good question, Michelle. There's a lot to be said about fog that I don't want people to get distracted with at this point. To just do the density of something, you'd want to just control the transparency of it. So like the rings of Saturn, if we made something like this, I'm just going to make a gradient. All right, so I'm just making an image with a gradient to control the density of it, right? So I'll say gradient, and it'll be circular. Let's flip it. So it's like this. There we go. And I'll put this on this disk. And I'll render this with an alpha channel. You could make this image with any program, Photoshop, Illustrator, whatever. Got to put the material on there. There we go. Great. And so this gives us a gradient. And this is something I could use over here. So for instance, if I put this on a plane, this would sort of do the job. Alpha channel, PNG, there we go. There we go. And so we make a new material. Call this fade, right? And so we're using the alpha channel here to fade this in and out. And making sure that we put in transparent. There we go. And switch it to additive. Now I've got something like fog, and just by controlling the gradient, I can control what parts are solid and what parts are not. Right, so I just made a gradient, and then the key was in the material. I put it in transparent additive mode. Cool, good question. I think Julia, can you hear the questions from the students better? You should be able to, because I think I routed them to the OBS. Let me know in the chat. Let's grab another one. Here's Tiffany. Everyone say hello to Tiffany.
So one
Hi,
thing
Tiffany.
that has gone well this week was I figured out how to add my recordings onto this OBS. Second thing that went well was, since I couldn't figure out how to stretch out like the polygons, the edges, or the points on an object, what I did was I just utilized the sweep tool and the spline to create the wing for my duck. So the thing that was very unclear, difficult was, like I mentioned, figuring out how to pull and drag these edges, the points and the polygons. I don't know what I did with the filter. I just did a test object, created like a new file, and I had no trouble moving it. I don't know what it was. Pause on there. I did have more ideas once I started working with the spline. I was like thinking, well, I could have just created most of my objects with the spline, especially the duck, because the duck isn't really round. I don't know if you had realized the duck that I had created, it was very bubbly, where like actual rubber ducky has more of a form to it. So I know that I will start using the spline tool more often. And I mean, does it raise any other questions? It's just time consuming, and if you don't know where something's located, then you could literally spend hours just trying to figure it out, even if you were to go on YouTube.
Or, what's a resource you guys have to ask each other questions when you're not in class? And me. Slack. Yes. So Tiffany, you don't need to spend hours doing that. You can ask, everybody else can also answer questions on Slack too.
YouTube or ask questions, sometimes you just kind of have to play with the program in order to understand how to use it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yep, I mean, it does come down to time. You just have to use it more. Good. All right, good, Tiffany. Here's Julia. Julia's always in our
Hi
chat.
everyone, it's Julia. So my question this week is, here's my squirrel. He turned out a little scary, but I think he's pretty cute. It's okay. So my question was about the ears that I did on him. If you zoom in, you'll see they're kind of weird. What I did was I used the Loft Object, and I'm not really sure what it did. So I guess that's my question, is what exactly that does. It made like a shape that looks earish, so I liked that, but I still don't really get what it does.
Okay, so Julia, the Loft Object connects splines. And so the ear that you made there looks pretty good, but you want it to have thickness, just like we talked about at the beginning of class about the box. And so I'm going to take a circle on the floor, like so, and I'm going to press C and do this. So grab some points to get an ear shape. And let's get these and move them out a little bit. Right, so that it has a little bit of a front and a back. And so here, maybe move this one out a little bit, kind of like so. There we go. And so now I'll take this and I'll control drag it up, the whole object. Got to be in object mode. There we go. And this part of the ear has to be, whoops, I have to make sure I hold down control. There we go. This part of the ear's got to be fatter. So I can hit T and bring it out like so. Maybe move it back just a touch. Maybe curve it in a little bit more by grabbing these points right here and moving them back. Kind of like that. And then this first one, I'm going to go back to object mode. And again, control drag it up, make this smaller. There we go. And now I got to make sure they're in the right order. There we go. 1, 2, 3. And so the Loft object essentially connects these things. Right, so we put them all inside the loft. And now we get, this would be a better ear shape for you, right? It would make it, you see how we have, this is the the ear has the inside, right? This is the inside-outside issue that we had before, right? And now, is that the best way to explain that, you think, guys? Like, it's like connect the dots, but with splines, right? You're defining the outside of the object, and you put them all in there, and then it sort of connects them. So I think that would be a better way to get your ear happening there.
To know, because I tried, let's see, where is that one? I tried the sweep for what I wanted for the ears, and I was trying to use a spline that was an open curve, 2 splines that were open curves, and that wasn't working with the sweep, I think is why, because they were open curves. So that wasn't doing what I wanted, and I got it to work with the loft, but I still don't actually know what it does. So thank you for answering that.
Cool, good. The other thing is like cartoon eyes. I would use 2 spheres perhaps, right? So here and maybe hit C on this to flatten it a little bit. There we go. And then white and black. Right. I think this gives you, put this below this. There we go. Right. This is going to look a little less weird, I think, with the squirrel. And you can also go ahead and take this one and just copy and paste it. And dial in the hemisphere shape. This will give you half of a sphere that you can easily rotate to form an eyelid. There we go. Right, so this allows you to be way more expressive. Take this whole thing and group it. And E. Right. There we go. We got a lot more character already. Cool. Good question, Julia. Dallas.
Hi. So this week my main problem was when I exported my 3D meshes I made that they weren't exported with the subdivision, but we covered that Monday and I've been able to fix all of the ones I had trouble with. Another problem I'm having is with a particular model I still have to make. So in the corner of my 2D scene I have this astronaut character floating there, and I honestly have no idea where to start modeling them.
Okay, so for a basic body, like, what do you think? Like, based on what you guys know. First of all, like, I try to show you guys different options for things, right? You realize it's not, some paths may be easier than others, right? But there's different ways to get to different shapes, right? So what body is kind of irregular. What might be a good, what might be an approach that you guys know?
I would just use different shapes. Like for the head, it's obviously a circle. Then you can manipulate that however you want for the mask. The body probably would start with a rectangle like that, and then the limbs, cylinders. That's how I feel about it. And then you can always round them out.
Okay, we could round them out, certainly. What would be another way to sort of combine them? What was the Play-Doh technique? the do I not have it on this version? Oh yeah. Volume builder, volume mesher. Everybody remember this one? All right, so the objects need to go inside the builder first, then inside the builder goes inside the mesher. Right, there we go. This is okay. Our body is too boxy. All right, so I could take the cube and certainly round it out some more. All right, and here, now things sort of move together into one shape, right? And you could set this up pretty easily at the beginning, and your computer should be, you know, good enough to run it while you're working, right? The body, instead of having one shape, you know, maybe two. If we this cube. Right, and here you can take advantage of your control drag, right? So control drag this down, T, right, there we go. Right, I can just sort of free-form shape things a lot better here. Probably do a better job of labeling stuff. This neck needs to be small, that's the arm. Here's the neck, there we go. Right, and so now I can start putting this together like so. I would say this would be the quickest route for you right now. Give this a shot, right? And instead of this, if I wanted more of a curved arm, what could I combine this technique with? How would you make a curved, just sort of like a, look at Dallas's art. Where is it? There we go. So you see that this is definitely like a curved shape. If you just had to make this arm, what would you use? What's that? You use the bend. The bend it ends up being more trouble than it's worth. When we want to bend something, the sweep allows you to sort of do it in a much more direct way. Rather than the bend is actually pretty, you got to wrestle it to make sure it's bending in the right direction, move it around, all that sort of thing. And so here, I could come in here with the sketch tool and be like, the arm's kind of like that. And then go ahead and sweep this, right? So this, and then sweep, and make sure it's thin. There we go. All right, so there's an arm. Move this into the right place. Get rid of this other arm. And you know, it can be part of our mesh by just, you can, it's not just primitives that you can put under this, you can put anything under this, right? And so here, you can put this in here, in there. Now he's got an arm. Actually, you can even skip further. You don't even, actually, does that work? I don't know if we just did this. Yeah, so you can just draw once it's in the volume builder, right? And so here, you can come in here with the spline, sketch, and there we go. Put these in there. It's a little too thin, but in our settings, there is a, yes. This is really powerful, right? So this is in the builder. Per splines, you have a radius option to fatten things up, right? And so you could come in here and do this for all the objects. Right. And so now, with very little overhead, right, this spline is a little bit off. I need to move it in here, so that's part of the body. There we go. Right. Now, this wouldn't be a great human to turn into a moving character, but for something that's just sort of floating there like this, this will be just fine for now, as a way to just sort of get some more experience doing it. So yeah, let me re-emphasize that to everybody, right? So by using this volume builder, volume mesher, you can do just draw it in 3D, right? Like you can, make the base shape here. Let's say it's a fat astronaut, also called a fatstronaut. Right, we get where's the cube, or the sphere here? Bring this one down. There we go. T. Right, there we go. Oh, let's not get crazy. There. Oh, the thing is, when you use the sphere, see how it gets kind of tiled there? You got to turn up the subdivisions on it to round it out. There we go. All right, so now we got, and you can come in here, hit C on the cube, or the sphere. You could sort of dial it in, like so. Right, and again, say, yeah, you can just come in here with the spline object, and needs ears, like this, or oops, the sketch object here and here. There we go, and these come down in here. Right, and so now there we go. Right, and these can be added. Let's move this in here like so. There we go. Right, and so Julia, your squirrel face, again, could be smoothed out a bit with this technique as well, right? So you could get another sphere, right, where's the head? There it is. So I'll control drag this forward, hit T, bring it down, E, right? And so now this is sort of more part of the face. There we go. Right. Sort of a more contiguous shape there. Right, and again, the one, I don't have it in here because I'm in the older version. Let's just all, because this is a really great technique, right? Because you're like, I could draw this. You have drawn it. Like here, we can just draw it into place, right? And then go from there with these controls. And the hierarchy you want to have written down is, I don't have the object in this version. At the top, you want the remesh. So that cleans up the mesh nice and clean. Then it would be the volume mesher. Then it would be the volume builder. And then it would be all the parts are underneath the volume builder. Right, because everybody's good at like scaling and moving and smushing shapes now, and this allows you to sort of bring them all into one form without it looking like a bunch of balls and cylinders, right? Does this make sense for everybody? Right, I sort of threw this one in at the end, but this is like really a pretty good technique. And in the volume builder, the things that really help here, selecting the spline, you get this spline thickness, which really allows you to, there we go. Right, much fatter. Right, and again, you can also create hierarchies here, right? This is part of the nose now, this is. So I'll put this under here. So that when I scale this, it's there. All that stuff is good. Bring it down, hit bring this down. There we go. Now it's looking pretty fat. And I think we got one more.
Hello. So I made my chameleon and I have my chameleon over here, and he's not very happy about it. He doesn't like to see
Wait, is
himself
that a real
represented
chameleon?
like this.
That looks really good.
Hello. So I made my chameleon and I have my chameleon over here, and
That's not like a.
Wait, zoom it out. I want to see it. That's freaking dope. Oh, I want one of them now.
Okay, that's not just a statue of a chameleon, it's an actual chameleon, right? Cassandra, are you on the chat still?
he's not very happy about it. He doesn't like to see himself represented like this. But anyways, I thought this doesn't look terrible like this, but with the lines, I mean, it is pretty bad. And I made this using the loft. I just created a bunch of circles and I put them in the loft. But I realized I delete things that I shouldn't have. I was using the loop selection, and I think I removed something here. So now his tail is it has a hole over there. And so I have also these pieces that looks like separated pieces. So I wonder if there's any way to fill this and also connecting this. Thank you.
Cool. All right, I think, yeah, that's a good start. So like bodies, lizard bodies, fish, I think a sweep works really well as your base shape, right? And so I'm gonna go there we go. And I'm going to sweep this. Kind of want to get it to where, what's the fattest point? Probably right about there. There we go. And I'll put these in a sweep. There we go. Now, this one down here, the details allows you to dial in the thickness over the length. So you can control click to, so this is the tail. I'll bring this down here, kind of like so. You can control click to add more points. And so I can dial this in. Does it make sense? Like this is thickness over length, the graph. And so here, again, let's look at that. Polygons aren't great right now, but there we go. And you did make good arms. So again, like combine, we can use that mesh, that volume builder workflow with this sweep workflow. Like this sweep workflow gives us a really nice sort of geometry here, right? And so now, for instance, I could create the rest of it here, right? So what direction these legs go? Kind of like this, right? Maybe this comes in a little bit. And then going out, rotate, more like so. This is a little bit thinner. right? And then there's some sort of foot or something. Okay, so this is all together. I could set this up correctly, right? So we do this, this, this. There we go. And now, same thing, Shift V, volume. Right, and so by putting that all together, this combines these things. The tail's a little weird here. Let's put in a smooth to get things rolling. Right, so this one right here, this smooth. And then you can dial in the strength of it. Right. And probably needs a little more detail here. So I'm going to say that this needs to come down. There we go. All right, so now I can sort of, like, we understand how to smooth the shapes some at this point. There we go. And I may need to adjust some of my sweep settings here. Sort of get this dialed in. Maybe adjust some of the sweep points, but now everything's coming together into one part, right? Start to bring the different parts together there. Sweep, bring this down right here, make more of a neck. There we go. Making sense? So I think that would help a bunch in this particular instance, Cassandra. Nice start though. Nice start. And again, you want to put that remesh at the top of it. I don't have that object right now. Cool, that's everybody's stuff, I think, right? Yep, cool. Moses, can't you just download it from the email that you sent me? Now that I think about that. And Cassandra, we won't know if that's a real command. What's that?
I have the original one, but you made it smooth, like super fast. So I was like, I can do that. And I just use the slice for the slicing, right?
Right. Remember I was using a knife to cut?
Yeah.
Right, so
I'm just doing this.
the cloud?
Well, I'm making great texture.
Okay. So is the cloud you did with the volume objects?
I believe so.
So show me the clouds and see what you want.
I think you scratched like 5 times for that. People are struggling.
Are you doing anything interesting or what happens?
I'm looking, I just opened the file and it crashes for whatever reason.
I think you're opening the FBX file. So you want to use, this is a cloud?
Yeah, this is the cloud.
Yeah, so the subdivision surface, you have multiple things underneath there.
Yeah.
Yeah. The subdivision surface smooths it, but it doesn't mesh it together, right?
Okay.
And so you want to take drag the connect out of there. Yeah. And now make your volume builder and volume mesher. I think they're both in this one here, the 3 blocks.
This one?
Builder and mesher. There
Yeah,
you go.
just
Connect.
regular image.
Yeah, connect inside the builder. No, the other way. Connect needs to be a child of the builder. The builder needs to be a child of the mesher. You have to drag the other way. Child. There you go. And then
Oh, it's
remesh. And remeshes in this one. The whole thing's in mesh. See how clean that is now?
yeah.
Yeah.
Nice and squishy.
And if you select the, here, let's go over to the, yeah, I mean, that's the density of the cloud. You can also smooth it out, so it comes forward a little bit. And go to builder. And this is where we can combine down here. Oh, you did it with the connect. So you don't even need connect, just drag that null. Yeah, the volume is doing the connect. You would use the connect first. So now it's how's that SDS? There. And smooths it way out, and then so now smoothing. Down, down. You can also still move your objects around, so it has a option. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, remember it's transparency, so you brought in, did you extract your textures? Right, it's the texture thing. It's right there. Good, okay, so now go to the leaf material. So you extract, I saw when you, where's the claims? Yeah, so you did, already pressed extract materials, where did you put material? There it is. And so you want to put the texture all in there? Yep. There we go. And now we just need to cut it out. So go ahead and say, it's not opaque, it's transparent. Yep. And then zoom in on that. Does that look right? And then, oh yeah, they're all the way at the bottom. If you scroll down. The render face, say both. There, now if you look at the bottom, yeah, there we go. There we go. Oh, get back here.
Oh, where's the diffuser for?
Oh, let's see what we get here. Can you scroll up? Can you scroll up? I don't know what they did there. Try, I think these are the color. Yeah, grab one of those, see what it looks like. Since it's a quad, it might be a little different. Yeah, that's good. That's good for you to use. Wait for that to come up, then grab the normal too. Yeah, you can sort of fake it with the tiling. So if you made it longer in the other direction, you dial on it. Yeah, so you can kind of stretch it without doing a bunch of other stuff. I think you might want two things. You might want a plane for the sand, and then you think it's a separate texture for the mountains. Like two objects rather than one object. Or is that the mountain?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Wait, so I'll do another plane and add it to.
Mm-hmm. Let's look at. Let's talk about the sky for 1 minute. So if you're doing an outside scene, or even if you're doing an inside scene, if we go back to Polyhaven, we grab some textures there. In addition to textures, they also have skies. That's what these HDRIs are. If you click on that, browse HDRIs. And so let's get a sky. Let's try to do something at night. There we go. This one, and let's say 8. We'll do 4 for now and see if it looks a little weird. All right. Now, the sky is an object. So we have this texture. The texture needs to go on a material. The material needs to go on the sky. And so here, and let's just make sure. We need to make a new skybox. Right, okay. So I make a new material. Actually, let's import the image first. So we'll import our new sky, which I downloaded here somewhere. Here we go. And just like we did with the normal channel, we need to tell the Unity that this is a sky. And so up here under texture type, we need to say light map direction. Yeah, I think we're okay here. Let's make a new material. And this is the thing, is that instead of we come up here to the shader, and we need to say that this is a skybox. And panoramic. There we go. And then there's a window here for lighting. General, or sorry, rendering, lighting, and skybox material. Here's our new material. There we go. Now, too much bloom. Let me turn this off for a second. Now I have that wrapped around my scene. So, let's do it one more time. We select a sky. I want one with just stars. I don't want any ground. This might be good. You see that 4K is a little blurry. 8K will take a little bit longer to download. But it should be quick here at school. So, download 4K or 8K texture. Import texture. Make new material. Change material shader to skybox panoramic is the kind of skybox we're using. And then add skybox material to the lighting / environment window. You guys get that down? And let's bring in the material. So import our 8K. There we go. And create a new material. We'll call this Night Sky 2. And this is the shader up here, right? So we haven't messed with this before. This is essentially what kind of material it is. And you just select skybox, panoramic. And you see that there's much less to do over here. Essentially we need to bring in the material. And so that is here. You can drag it in. And you can turn the exposure up or down, brighter or darker. And Then this is also new, rendering, lighting. There's different tabs here. There's a lot of stuff. In environment, this is the one that we care about. This is where we provide the material. There we go. Now, there. Now we got some night sky happening. Let's dial in our light a little bit more here. Let's turn our volume back on, and instead of this glowing green, this will be one of Katrina's orange pumpkins, so maybe not that bright. Right, and so if your face cutouts have a separate material from the outside of the pumpkin, you could glow the cutouts to make it look like there's a light inside the pumpkin. And so this gives us much more of a night-ish look. Still a little bit bright. I could come back into this material, or sorry, the material. You can dial down the exposure of it. There we go. Now, nighttime is the right time. We've got it set up. And so we come in here and cool. We can get our long nighttime shadows. Maybe not quite that dark. Moody. Right, so yeah, and it doesn't have to be, yeah, let's leave it at that for now. We covered a lot today. All right. Gonna save this. Any questions, Julia? So how do you guys feel about getting this scene together for Monday?
Hopefully my computer doesn't keep crashing.
Did it crash again? Can you pull it open? Let's see if we can get it up. All right. What besides crashing computers, what other issues do we have? Everybody feels like you've got a vision, clear view of the finish line. The only thing standing between you and success is time. Yeah? Is Unity crashing or is it still waiting?
It's I think it's just my computer because I'm running out of space. So whenever I pull
How
up
much
the
space
file,
is there?
not a lot. I had to move out of here. So it's a little less.
Go up to my computer.
It's whenever I go here, it stops crashing.
Okay, so what's taking up all the space on the computer?
All the projects that used to have a bunch of photos from photography and I had to move it to hard drive.
Yeah.
But it only has like 200 gigabytes.
The hard drive?
Yeah, on the computer. So I pretty much use all of that. And I have to move it here.
Yeah, you need to free up. You want at least 50 of those free. At least. Yeah, that's right.
And so yeah, every time.
There's plenty of space on that, right?
This is 500.
Yeah.
So this is on the computer, I have to, it just copies it and puts it on here,
Yeah.
which is not what I want, I just wanna move it. But I guess it's just a little, so I have to start setting it.
So you can't move files over there?
It just copies them and puts them in here. It doesn't actually move the whole thing in there. Does that make sense? It just makes a copy.
Right. So then you.
So it's still there, it's still taking up space.
Right, but then once it makes a copy, you can delete the one that's on this one, right?
Yeah. I don't know why there's like 15. I don't know.
So where's all your schoolwork?
I moved it here, this is the room.
You sure it's all copied over
It
there?
should all be over here.
Okay, so go online. You want a program, terribly named but really great program. Just go to Chrome and download WizTree. WIZTREE. This is my. It's 10 out of 9 all the time. It's such a great program with an absolutely terrible name. You know, it just sounds like you're going to the bathroom on a tree. But it's like they're really, yeah, just the So WizTree allows you to actually see a graph of your hardware. If you're having problems with space, yeah, so that's your main drive, right? Can you see it? Yeah. Can't scan super fast. And it gives you this. So you can see what is actually eating up space on the hard drive. Right? Everybody come over here, look at this. Look at this is the message of the computer. Alright, so here, like you can see like how valuable this is, right? Because now, besides just like searching through a bunch of folders, right, you get this down here. So you can graphically see like what is like what's the big purple thing representing?
It's gotta be this right here.
Right. Yeah, okay, so there's a couple things you can tell right away. The page file is like a Windows swap file. But yeah, so here you can see like it puts in a big block, right? And so then you can come up here and look and select the folders. It'll show you like what's like okay, so okay, that's all of that shit right there, right? And you also got two versions of C3 on here with all the stuff. This is 23 and 24.
That's what's in, that's the one from last semester. Or the last time I was here.
Right. Yeah, so
I don't know.
yeah, you can delete 22. Right, that's going to free up a huge amount of space. This. These are like this files, right? Yeah, so I mean, if you're not sure, like, you can use something to use this file sometime. Huge files in the download. see how easy this is now? Like you can tell what's going on. So first thing, delete sim 4822. So whiz tree. Definitely want, like, make the product with like the worst marketing and the best product. Like, it's really good at doing what it, being able to clean up your computer. But, you know, come up with some other name. All right, so you got 4 days here to get everything together into your scene. Sound good? All right, I'm gonna end the stream so that all this information is up there.